Well, welcome. I'm Commissioner Jeff Blubaugh, Commissioner District 2. I'm here with Commissioner Jim Howell.
I'm Jim Howell, Commissioner for District 5.
So today we want to talk about property taxes. It's something that we hear about all the time, and talk about our valuation system. We want to talk about our legislative agenda. But first, I just kind of want to discuss that property tax bill. Commissioner, would you like to tell us a little bit about what are they receiving in the mail?
Well, first, I'd just like to thank you for the question, Jeff. I'd like to just start off by saying that we're aware property taxes are one of the most politically heated topics right now in the entire state of Kansas, and understandably so. I think that you've seen your tax bill just climb unexplainably, as well as I have, and we hear from people all the time. One of the biggest things I do in terms of constituent discussion is talk about property taxes. It seems like it's never ending, and so there's a lot about property taxes that people don't know, and there's some simple things we can do to actually make this a little bit better in terms of, if you know where your taxes are going and what they do, it might alleviate some of the frustration. I think most of the frustration comes from three things. People feel like they're being picked on by a system that's broken. They're a victim of a system that overappraises their value, and they're paying more taxes than they should pay. There's a belief that government is very inefficient and we waste people's money. And then thirdly, they don't really know where the money goes. They just see they write this giant check and it just disappears in government, and they don't really know where it goes. And so by addressing those three things, I think it does a little bit to make people feel a little bit better. It's almost like saying, I hate paying that giant car payment, but I like my car. Yeah. Okay. At the end of the day, this is an idea that if you simply would split the tax bill up, some states actually split the tax bill as many as 4 different ways. If we wrote a check to local government and another check to state government for schools, everything that relates to schools is state. That's about half your tax bill, and the other half to local government. At least you would understand then my city police, my city library, my streets, my local streets I drive on, my fire department are paid for with this tax bill, and my schools are paid for with that tax bill. That helps a little bit. Yeah. I think secondly, just naming the appraiser, because it really is a state mandated way to collect money for government. It's a state law. We're funding with your property tax dollars a state mandated office. So it really should be the state appraiser, a state assessor for Sedgwick County. And it shouldn't be called the Sedgwick County appraiser because they don't really work for us. We don't control what they do. This is in compliance with state law. So changing the name, splitting the tax bills up are 2 ways we can actually alleviate some of the frustration. There's a lot of other things we can do. Actually, we have some great ideas, Jeff, that I love to get people to understand. Some of these ideas would really revolutionary change our property tax system in the state of Kansas for the better.
Yeah, we're only 20 to 25% of that total property tax bill. There's 40, 50 different taxing entities on there. Your schools, your cemetery, your city. There's a lot of other things going on there.
And actually, I pay to 9 different jurisdictions. 20% of my tax bill is Sedgwick County. 80% goes to the other 8. Yeah. So I ask people, which jurisdiction raised your taxes? They look at me like, what are you talking about? That's why this education matters. You and I have been meeting, and we've been meeting collectively. We finally got our legislative agenda items here. So some of the big things that we're looking at, of course, you named just renaming the county appraiser, as you mentioned, because it is the state appraiser. The money is going to the state, and the county is just the arm of that. One of the other things that I get a lot of feedback is the inconsistency in valuations. What we see with inconsistency of valuation is someone's overpaying, but someone's underpaying too. Right. And we need to have a more accurate process. I actually call them, someone who underpays, they're kind of getting a good deal. And it's funny, many of them still complain about their taxes. But those that are overpaying their taxes, I actually call them victims. Yeah. And essentially, it's taking someone's property unjustly, unfairly. It's like a constitutional violation to me, the way I see this. What we really want to have is a very accurate appraisal system, as accurate as possible, because that is exactly how that's used to divide up the government burden. Everyone gets an apportionment of the government burden based on a relevant tax assessment. So if the assessment process is broken, then someone's going to overpay and someone else is going to underpay, and that is unfair. One thing about tax policy is it has to be fair, and this is inherently not fair because of those inaccuracies that you're speaking of, Jeff. Yeah.
So I spoke here a couple weeks ago. I spoke to the interim committee on taxation in Topeka, and I shared with them 31 cases I had of where go through the protest process, and there was not $1 of change at any level of government. I get that from a lot of constituents. You can say that, well, it's people don't know how to do the valuations, or they don't know the correct process. But I've been a broker for 25 years. I speak with a lot of other people that are pretty educated, that really we've got to have a system that works for everybody, and it's got to be a check and balance system. And one of the things I want to talk about that we put on our legislative agenda is we want to ensure that BOTA, the Board of Tax Appeals, hears these cases within 1 year. I know of cases that have been out there for over 3 years,
Wow.
and I think that's something that we've got it on our legislative agenda, and we're going to try to push forward. It's unfair to keep that, because how much do property valuations change over 3 years? That's a big thing.
This is a really important topic that you have raised, Commissioner Blubaugh. It's something I was unaware of, and I think this is a really important part of this. Is that it's almost like the speedy trial principle. Someone who uses government and makes an appeal, they shouldn't have to wait years to get this rectified.
Another thing that we had on our legislative agenda, and we kind of pulled back on it a little bit, is we wanted to have a dashboard to be able, we want to be transparent, we want to show the public how many appeals there are and how many of those appeals end up in a change and what the dollar value of that is. We've backed off that a little bit, because I don't know how important it is to Sedgwick County to know what the other 104 counties are doing.
Right.
But for our citizens that have elected us, I think you and I both agree that it's very important that we have that transparency out there, and the public has a good understanding of what
Absolutely.
that is.
It's about accountability. People can see what's going on. Exactly. You know, Jeff, you make a really good point on that. And again, very similar to that. In the past, the county has had a local board. It's called the Hearing Officer Panel, or HOP for short. And we used to have one. It is another level of appeal that actually has binding decision authority. So after the appraiser does his work, rather than after you go to the informal appeal, which probably, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, you would have another stop before you end up with BOTA. And this stop would be a county panel that would hear the case. It's a panel of people that are not the appraiser, it's not the county commissioners, but it is a hearing officer panel, and they can make a binding decision locally based on data that's presented at that local hearing. This would adjudicate, I think, a lot of people who have a lot of really good ideas. Rather than having to go to BOTA, they could actually resolve that stuff right here in Sedgwick County.
There's a lot of good ideas going out there. With my discussion with Senator Tyson, that's over the taxation process for the Senate, she had actually brought up a taxpayer advocate, and that is something that she is asking for, that basically helps a taxpayer come in here and, this is what you need, this is how to better present your case as to your valuation. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to strive toward as much fairness as we can in what the actual assessments are. I know a lot of homes that were built the same year, the same floor plan, and you'll see several tens of thousands of dollars of differences in those properties, and we want to ensure that we are consistent as possible in our valuation process.
Jeff, one other thing that's on this legislative platform, which is very similar to some of the other things we've already talked about, would be the appraiser themselves. Currently, under state law, they have to have 3 years of mass appraisal experience to be selected or be eligible to be selected by the county Board of County Commissioners to be the appraiser. What we actually end up doing is signing a 4-year contract with that person, and then once every 4 years, our only decision is, do you want to continue to contract with this person for the next 4 years? We can let them go, or we can commit to another 4-year process. One of the things about that, though, is the appraiser is a technical position. The way it's laid out by the state law, the requirements to become an appraiser are very rigid and very high, which sounds great. But the problem with that is, and I don't mean to be critical to anybody who's been an appraiser, but they're not tuned into what the people are feeling. I want to see an appraiser much more like an elected position, where someone is listening to the taxpayers and they care deeply what they're sensing, what they're feeling. I want someone to be an advocate for the people. And unfortunately, right now, the appraiser is not an advocate for the people. They're an advocate for a rigid system that, frankly, doesn't necessarily understand how people feel. The arguments they fall flat. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of compassion from anybody to understand the other person's side.
So to your point, that was one of the things we put on our legislative agenda. KSA 19-1430 requires that individuals have 3 or more years of mass appraisal experience. Now, we look at a lot of people that have leadership experience, have global real estate experience. They would not qualify for this. Attorneys, folks like that, they would not qualify for this. And I hope that we were able to get somewhere with this legislation, because it's very challenging to, if you want a new vision on this, it's hard to. It's hard to basically have a new vision with this when you're limiting this to the 3 years of mass appraisal experience, because it's going to limit the pool to only individuals that have worked their way through the county appraisal process.
And the appraiser is also a director. They have about 70 to 80 direct reports for that office. And I'm looking at someone who has leadership experience, an MBA, for example.
Absolutely.
They're managing people, managing office issues, and have a good forward facing for the public. There's good interface to the public, and there's a way for people to be heard in a much more effective way. And right now, I feel like the system is just so cold and uncaring, and it's almost like, and I know there's an accusation out there, it's almost like their goal is to increase tax revenue. They're do whatever they can to increase tax revenue, and that argument seems real, even though they would tell you that's not what they do. They try to be data driven, but it feels like, and I understand this from the taxpayer's perspective, it feels like their entire purpose is to raise tax revenue. You and I have to just tell you, Jeff, I don't care one bit about what the total assessed value is.
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. What I really want is a fair system. Everyone has a fair appraisal, a fair assessment, so that the tax burden is fairly divided up amongst the taxpayers. You and I know the total tax burden is something we pass when we pass a budget. So our goal is not necessarily the details of trying to figure out how to raise revenue by using the appraiser. Our goal is to pass a budget that's as lean as possible that funds government, and then how that's divided amongst the taxpayers is the work of the appraiser. And so what they have to do, my opinion, is have the fairest, most accurate appraisal system possible. That should be their goal. And that's really the only goal they have. If their goal is to raise revenue, they're misguided. And so, again, I know it's a very strong opinion, and I have to tell you, from the taxpayer's perspective, it sure feels like that's what's going on.
Well, Commissioner, I appreciate all the efforts that you've moved forward. This is a continuous improvement model. It's not going away. I know we're going to continue to work this through next year and the years to come. So I'd love to hear anyone's feedback. If you'd like to reach out to me, send me an email at jeff.blubaugh@sedgwick.gov.
Mine is jim.howell@sedgwick.gov. I would love to hear from people as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.